We'll be reviewing an example of an unsuccessful medical personal statement. This is based on real ones that we've received in the past, although this isn't a specific one from a particular student, but it's written to be similar to those that we've seen in the past that haven't been successful. And we'll be going through different aspects of why they weren't successful and how you could improve your personal statement so that you don't fall into the same traps that they did. So this is an example of a personal statement. Like I say, it's not a real personal statement, but based on ones that we've seen in the past that haven't been successful. So let's go through it. They've written, "I want to be a doctor as it combines science with helping people. I've excelled at science, gaining some of the best GCSE and AS level results in my school. I particularly enjoy biology and have sat the British Biology Olympiad. In addition to my academic achievements, I have multiple extracurricular activities, including being captain of the cricket and rugby team and playing violin in an orchestra. I have also done work experience in a hospital. I think I am suited to a career in medicine as I am able to understand scientific concepts and apply them to real-world situations. I am also active in my school, running a variety of clubs and societies. Studying medicine will give me a chance to gain a better understanding of the human body, which has always fascinated me. Becoming a doctor will be a rewarding and stimulating career, which will constantly challenge me and stimulate my scientific curiosity." So before we go on, I want you to stop the video and just have a little think about what you think of this personal statement. Is this a good personal statement? What do you know of the student having read through this? What are their passions? Why do they want to be a doctor? What evidence have they shown of teamwork? What evidence have they shown of leadership and maturity and multitasking? What evidence have they shown of being able to of giving things back to society and also of being able to give things to the university? Once you've had a little bit of time to reflect on that, we'll go through some of the specific aspects of this personal statement that could potentially be done better. On the face of it, it sounds like a really good student. They've obviously done very well academically, and they've got a couple of extracurricular activities, including cricket, rugby, and playing in an orchestra. They've done some work experience. They've run a few clubs and societies, and on the face of it, it sounds like they want to be a doctor as it combines science with helping people. So they've actually given a reason as to why they want to be a doctor. But let's think about each of these things in turn. So the first thing to say about this is it's too short. A personal statement has to be 4,000 characters. This particular one was only 919 characters. And you'll be surprised how often we see an occasional personal statement that's much shorter than the word limit. Now, you may, on the face of it, not be able to work out how many characters there are, but when you read through 20 or 30 personal statements, you will definitely notice the difference between those that are between 3,000 and 4,000 characters, and then suddenly one that's below 1,000 characters. Just because a personal statement is long doesn't necessarily mean it's good, but by having that length of characters, what you are giving yourself is the opportunity to sell yourself in multiple different domains. And if you've watched the previous videos on the different aspects of things that we are looking for in a personal statement, and those things that are desirable, which we'd hope to see in a personal statement, you'll see that there's a huge amount of information you need to add into your personal statement. And unfortunately, this particular student just hasn't put enough information into their personal statement. It doesn't cover those essential criteria. So when you're writing your personal statement, I'd really highly recommend going back and watching those other videos, going through the different essential criteria and also those that we'd particularly like to see but aren't necessarily essential. In doing so, you'll have a much better idea of how to give a rounded personal statement. In addition to that, if you've already submitted your personal statement, then the other thing that you can do is watch those other videos, find out the domains that you may not have put enough information into, and then when it comes to the interview itself, you can really try to concentrate on bringing those points points forward, because no doubt we will probably ask you about those aspects if we haven't seen them in your personal statement. Now, another problem with this personal statement is that it's just not specific enough. The student reels off a number of achievements, that they were the captain of a cricket team, of a rugby team, and they did the biology Olympiad. Well, let's take the biology Olympiad, for example. Anyone could write that, but we have no idea of how they did in the biology Olympiad, what level they achieved, and what they got out of doing it. So compare that one sentence that they wrote in the personal statement with something that's slightly different. Here, the slightly improved version would be, I particularly enjoyed studying for the British Biology Olympiad, where I gained a gold medal, as it allowed me to expand my knowledge outside of the A-level curriculum and consider more challenging concepts in biology. Now, can you see how that gives so much more information about who the candidate is and what their motivations are? Now we're starting to see why you've put in the biology Olympiad into your personal statement, because you're trying to showcase the fact that you are reading around the biology curriculum that you learnt at school. It also shows that you are looking at more challenging concepts, that you are trying to push yourself intellectually. It shows that you're someone who's driven, motivated, and also academically able. Also, by being specific, by saying that you gained a gold medal or a silver medal in the Olympiad, what it also shows is that you've got an achievement. As admissions tutors, we're naturally slightly skeptical, and if people just put in a random fact like they did the biology Olympiad, our automatic assumption is, oh, they just sat it, they may not have achieved anything much from it. So if you have achieved something, put it in, because not only does it make your claim more credible, but also it gives us a context that shows us what you achieved, how you achieved it, and most importantly for this, what you got out of it and how that's relevant to applying to medical school and also relevant to becoming a doctor. Another example of where they just were not specific enough. They said that they did rugby, cricket, and they played in the orchestra, but they never actually mentioned what they got out of it. So they were essentially just random things that they were just saying. What would be much better is a paragraph such as this. In addition to my academic interests, I have multiple extracurricular interests, such as captaining the school rugby and cricket A teams and playing first violin in our school orchestra. Already, can you see how they're much more specific? They've talked about which teams they captained and that they played violin and what position they played the violin in their school orchestra. Then they go on to say, captaining various sports has emphasised the importance of organisation and clear communication, especially sorting out fixtures and venues for various matches. It has highlighted how facilitating teamwork can help achieve difficult victories. An achievement I am particularly proud of was the captaining the rugby first 15, who won the South London Schools Club. I hope to continue these interests at university, and I aim to organise a strings group. Can you see how there's so many bits to this which are useful, that show the qualities that we're looking for in medical students and also in future doctors? Being organised, having clear communication, facilitating teamwork. And the really important thing I want to emphasise with this particular part of the personal statement is that they've shown passion and specific example specific to them. Here they say, an achievement I am particularly proud of was captaining the rugby first 15. Here, automatically it's capturing our imagination, and we will automatically see this personal statement and say, oh yes, this is the chap who won the South London School Cup. Can you see how it's much more specific, it's less generic? And in one of the previous videos we talked about how you should be able to pick your personal statement out of a pile of personal statements. There should be something specific to you. Well, it's putting in these sorts of phrases where you talk about something that you're particularly passionate about or proud of. That's what we want to see in a personal statement. And the icing on the cake is where this student has then gone on to say, I hope to continue these interests at university and specifically aim to organise a strings group. This shows that you're going to be engaged in the medical school environment and give something back to the medical school. It's not a one-way street. As much as the medical school is there to give you a medical education, it's also there for you to give something to it to enrich the university life. So this paragraph here is so much more powerful. It's still saying the same things as what the first personal statement said, but it gives that much more depth and clarity, and also makes it more useful for us as admissions tutors to say, yes, these are the qualities that we're looking for in a candidate. I don't know how many of you noticed, but there was a spelling mistake in the personal statement. Also, the grammar wasn't perfect. There were lots of very long sentences. You have to be very, very careful with your personal statement. And it is so devastatingly bad when we see personal statements with spelling mistakes. And also, really, with grammatical mistakes. Spelling mistakes show a level of carelessness. And carelessness really doesn't look too good on an application, especially to medical school. And it can often be a make or break if you see these spelling mistakes, because what it shows not only is that you've been careless in uploading it, but also that you just haven't spent the time or shown it to people to review it and to make sure that you've got a good quality application. It should really take you about 3 to 4 months to do your personal statement. Your first draft should be written, and then you need to leave it for a couple of weeks, come back to it, read it again. You'll be surprised how many times you'll pick up little spelling mistakes, grammatical errors, which you wouldn't have otherwise noticed. And when we see these spelling mistakes or grammatical mistakes, it often shows us that these are people who have rushed the personal statement and then put it all down right at the last minute. Now, I know it's really easy to leave things to the last minute, but this is one of those times that it really is important to do it early, to show it to multiple people so that they can have a look and pick up on these simple mistakes that can just absolutely flatten your chances of getting into medical school. So please, at the very least, do a spell checker, but just as importantly, get it shown to multiple other people who can pick up on other spelling mistakes or grammatical mistakes that a word processor may not be able to pick up on. This is an example of someone who wrote about why they wanted to become a doctor. That's very powerful and actually much more useful than that one sentence that you saw in the previous personal statement. Here they wrote, "I was particularly influenced in my decision to study medicine when I was looking after my grandmother, who was suffering from breast cancer. Early on in her care, I was impressed by the amazing array of medications and treatments ranging from chemotherapy, hormone therapy and radiotherapy that were offered to her. It was exciting to see cutting-edge medical treatments being administered and the depth of understanding the doctors had in this complex and challenging disease. However, as my grandmother's disease progressed, despite these technological and scientific breakthroughs, what struck me was the compassion and genuine psychological care given to her by doctors and nurses alike. It highlighted the power that 5 minutes of a doctor's time, sitting with the family and patient, explain all the unknowns and allaying as best they can the fears we all had, was worth more than all the medications and treatments she had been given." You can see how that's a lot more powerful than that one sentence talking about enjoying science and wanting to help people. Because they talk about, rather than saying explicitly that they're interested in science, they've given examples of where they've been impressed by the array of medications and treatments, that they've actually looked up all these different things that their grandmother had: chemotherapy, hormone therapy, radiotherapy. It's obvious that they're interested in the scientific breakthroughs. They say it's exciting to see the cutting-edge medical treatments. But then they move on to the other part of being a doctor, which is actually treating the patient, and talking about how they were struck by the compassion and psychological care given by doctors, that they understood that it's just as important as a doctor to communicate with the patient and the family, and that 5 minutes of the doctor's time sitting with them and explaining all the unknowns and allaying their fears was worth more than the medications and the treatments that she was given. that they understand that empathy, communication, and just being there for patients is just as important as being as understanding the sciences. This is so much more powerful. But even if this sort of case isn't something that you've personally been involved with, certainly during your work experience, you will see interactions with patients. Use those examples as examples of where people have been empathetic, that they've worked with patients and their families, they've used their communication skills, they've shown caring of people. So you don't necessarily need to have something bad happen to you or one of your family members. You can use the examples of the things that you see around you. And work experience is such a rich environment to gain these sorts of insights. And it's really worth watching my video on how to get things out of your work experience and what things to really try and gain from it. Because it'll highlight the things that not only can you talk about in your personal statement, but you can also talk about them at the interview and segue into those points when you're answering any questions in the interview. So that additional one, you can see we had much more personalized information, talked about the grandmother, talked about what the student found amazing about looking at the cutting edge information and treatments, how they found that talking with a doctor just allayed their fears and gave them that psychological support. They gave nice specific examples. These are concrete examples that weren't generic. They talked about how they responded to the particular situation that they were in. And they, for bonus points really, talked about how it was doctors and nurses alike, that there was a multidisciplinary team effort, that they understand that being a doctor isn't just about doing things on your own, but working as part of a team. Even though they never actually said that they're excited by the science of medicine, it's obvious from what they were writing that they are. And they highlighted communication and caring, which are vital things that we look for in medical students and qualities that we want in our medical students when studying medicine and being doctors. So you can see how much more effective that paragraph is than the sentence that was written in the original personal statement that just said that they were interested in science and helping people. Going back to that first personal statement, they've said understanding scientific concepts and applying them to real-world situations. But this is a very generic statement. Anybody could say this. So what you again need to do is to take those sorts of comments and really personalize it. So rather than saying this, what they could say is, an example of this is a presentation I gave during my biology AS level based on a recent article in Scientific American about nanotechnology. I argued that nanotechnology may one day help us to fight multiple antibiotic-resistant bacteria by augmenting the immune system. Can you see how by giving that specific example, you've actually proven that you like looking at sort of more complex scientific concepts and that you've got the talent for applying them to the real world? And also, don't forget that some of the people who will be interviewing you will have research interests. And so by putting in this last sentence about how you argued that it might be used to fight multiple antibiotic-resistant bacteria, not only are you showing that you're aware of something that's a really important problem in medicine, which is antibiotic resistance, but you're thinking about ways around it and thinking about how you can apply what you're learning to improve medical care. So just adding those additional two sentences really fleshes out that more generic sentence that was written in the first personal statement. It personalizes it and also gives us proof that you're not just saying it, but you've actually done something to move things forward and show that you do have that scientific understanding of scientific concepts and you are able to apply it to real-world situations. So overall, even though the bare bones of the personal statement that we read at the start was okay, you can see how it's got multiple flaws to it and multiple ways in which you can improve it. It's really worth going back and thinking about exactly what it is that we're trying to gain out of a personal statement. And if you watch our previous videos, you'll have all of those points. Also worth signposting each of those points. It's almost like a beacon. If we see the words communication, caring, multidisciplinary team, teamwork, leadership, they're all tick boxes that we've mentally got. So if you signpost each of those and then give a specific personal example of those things, automatically we're going to like that personal statement, because it's easy for us to then tease out the things that we're looking for in order to give you an interview. But I cannot emphasize enough how you have to give specific examples that are personal to you. And what makes them really powerful is if you give an example and then talk about how you responded to that example. Show passion. What we want are people who are passionate about science, passionate about caring for people, passionate about medicine. And by writing generic things like I am interested in science and how that's applied to real world situations has zero passion to it. But by putting in that additional thing about how you looked into nanotechnology, for example, really shows passion and drive beyond that of a generic sentence. And that's really what will pique our interest and make us want to interview you and talk to you, as opposed to someone who writes just a number of generic platitudes. So I hope you found that useful, but really the key thing is trying to signpost and go through each of the points that we've covered in previous videos in your personal statement to make sure that you've got all the things that we are looking for as admissions tutors.